This is my official audition video for the TED Talks for Nurses. My name is Dr. Julius Johnson. I have a Doctor of Nursing practice. I'm a family nurse practitioner. I'm currently the director of the Family Nurse Practitioner Program at Long Island University, Brooklyn. I'm also the president of the Greater New York City chapter of the Black Nursing Association. And I'm also the owner of my own company, Premium Health Depot, that does home-based primary care. And this is the beginning. So it's March 13th, and I'm in Atlanta with friends at a bachelor party. And now I'm looking on the screen, and all of a sudden we see New York City is shut down. And everybody starts looking around me saying, are we going to be able to get back home? Because this is what they're worried about. My mind, though, is worried about a bunch of other things. As a nurse, as a healthcare leader, I have students I got to prepare. I was in the process of reaccreditation to keep our nurse practitioner program. And I'm also wondering what's going to be the outcome of this being the beginning stages of the pandemic. So I arrived back in New York City, and as an educator, the first thing we find out is that the meeting we was preparing for reaccreditation, we preparing for 6 months, 7 months, has now been postponed indefinitely. Bunch of hard work down the drain. But now we're forced with another dilemma to handle, and that's the one of clinical placement for our nursing students. And this is a critical time because it's in the middle of March. We have students that's supposed to graduate in May. They have to complete 500 mandatory hours. And now they're reading things that says Department of Health says, go to telehealth if you can. So now what are we gonna do with all our students? We have to come up with a plan. It's nothing but confusion going on. It's frustration from students, and it's arguing amongst faculty and other people. So we do what nurses do. We sit down at a table, virtually of course, and we start trying to figure this out. How can we make this work? What is the minimum amount of hours for a clinical? How can we get this going? How can we get students over? How do we transition into telehealth? But I also have to remember that I'm a Black man that comes from underprivileged, impoverished communities. And that also means that the concept of telehealth is privilege. It's privilege because telehealth sounds great. Let's just switch over from coming into the office and let's just go to telehealth, and I'll call you on your phone or your computer and I'll do everything I need to do for you. But there's a gap, right? Because I know that there's a lot of people in the communities that I serve that don't have the capabilities of doing telehealth. They don't have phones with internet. They don't have adequate or working computers. And a lot of them don't even have Wi-Fi. But this is not a concept privileged people understand. So I know that we're getting ready for a huge drop-off in the care. Then I have to deal with that, and all of a sudden, I go from being a nurse educator and an assistant professor at LIU Brooklyn in classes to now becoming a therapist. Because my students, when I get them back, as this crisis starts worsening, so we go from March 13th and you start going into April, when New York City numbers start rising and people are dying by the hundreds every day. My students are on the front lines of hospitals doing this work. They're in the emergency rooms, they're in the ICUs, and they're beyond stressed. Now I have to decide, do I actually teach a class and teach content to people who are not listening? Or do I talk to them about what they're going through, right? Because they have to work this front line, then they also have to be there for their family members, and they also have to be students. So I go with my gut, which is, let's not do any kind of classwork. You're not going to comprehend that. I'd much rather talk to you and see what's going on. What's bothering you? How is it on the units? How can we help each other as students? Do any of y'all work with each other, right? And as we're doing this, they're starting to say that they appreciate this much more. Somehow they learn better this way than what they would have if I actually taught them. So now I have to spread this knowledge out to other professors, and that's great. But in the meantime, while I'm doing this, something even bigger happens. When I switch off my hat and I put on my hat as the president of the Greater New York City Black Nursing Association, I'm now starting to get phone calls from my membership committee. And I'm hearing we don't have enough gloves. We don't have enough N95 masks. We don't have enough nurses. And then I'm also hearing everybody that's coming into these hospitals are looking like black people or people of color or poor people. And then there's an old saying, when white America catches a cold, black America gets pneumonia and possibly dies. And while I was so focused on helping my students, it almost feels like I forgot about the actual community. And my membership community, my membership committee of the Black Nursing Association reminded me of this. And they started saying, we have to do something about this. It's getting ridiculous. ICUs went from 10-bed units to 30-bed units. Emergency rooms start having people all over, spread throughout. No gowns, no masks, no gloves, but an excess of fear running around about this pandemic. Nurses getting sick, nurses getting COVID, nurses feeling like they're not allowed to call out sick or quarantine or take care of themselves, nurses getting their family members sick. And they come to me as president and say, we need to do something about it. So what do? We rally. We sit down and start discussing how can we make an impact? How can we leverage our partnerships that we already have and bring these people to the community? So we throw our first Nurses on the Frontline town hall, and it was a huge success. Over 150 people came out. Deans, emergency room nurses, nurse practitioners, nurse anesthetists, administrators. And we lead this powerful conversation along with politicians and letting them know what we need and what happens. And what happens 2 days later, a lot of the demands and things that we needed started being presented by Governor Cuomo. So now we know people are listening to us. We have a voice. And if we have a powerful voice, we have a huge responsibility because we can't stop this and just leave this here. So what's next? We have to do a follow-up town hall because now we're getting calls from nurses in the VA, nurses at the nursing home, saying that it's the worst here. We need your help. So now we have to dig down deep and do our research about them. How do we bring them to the table? How do we bring more politicians to the table to do this? So we get Senators Chuck Schumer, we get Kevin Baker, Kevin Parker, we get Congresswoman Lauren Underwood from Chicago, and we get them all back on the line for another town hall. And this time we get upwards to 200 people to sit in on this phone call, to sit in on this virtual Zoom town hall and start discussing things. But this time, as New Yorkers and as leaders, we as the board decided we wasn't just gonna talk about the problem and how it's getting better, we was gonna talk about how other states can prevent this. Tools that other nurses can use. What should other nurses expect? When to realize that your situation is getting better. So we do all of this and it goes off with a hit. And everybody is saying, all right, we're ready for your third town hall because the people are listening. We need to know how we're gonna help our communities. And we start putting together community packages. We start putting together interventions to help the community. And in the middle of all of this, we get brought back to the true essence of America. Because in Minneapolis, Officer Derek Chaffin has his knee on George Floyd's neck. And while America was in shock to see this play out, it was something that we had seen way too many times. We had seen it with Eric Garner right here in New York. We had seen it in Sean Bell when he was shot and killed here in New York. We had seen it when Akeem Gurley was killed here in New York. We had seen it in these other places, Philando Castile. We've seen it with kids and Tamir Rice. We've seen it with non-officers who wanted to be officers with Trayvon Martin. And now America finally, because they was forced to sit home from a pandemic after losing their jobs, get to see this on TV, what we live every day. And the frustrations grow watching this as a black man, as a healthcare provider, knowing what the risk of being black is. And then the membership committee of Black Nursing Association does something again. They come to me and say, Dr. J, we gotta do something about this. We need to do something. So we do what nurses do. we get together, we meet, and we put our brains together. What are we gonna do about this, right? And all sorts of ideas came out. Let's put out a statement. Everybody's putting out a statement. So if we gotta put out a statement, it gotta be impactful. It can't just say we support the Black Lives Matter movement. It gotta say what we want to happen. That's cool. But what goes after that? We need to put out a list of well-researched, evidence-based demands that we want now. So we craft those demands and we put them up and we send it out. But that can't be it. So what else do we do? Then we decide we're gonna protest. Bring the healthcare workers. Because now Fox News and other people are trying to label the protests as thugs, right? Because that's how we're seen as Black people, over-criminalized, over-incarcerated, thugs. That's the word for my skin. But I know that my stethoscope, my jacket, my lab coat makes me look very different. Something that nobody can deny, because America just spent the past couple of months calling healthcare workers heroes. So we organized a healthcare workers march. And in my head, I say, we probably get about 50 to 100 people from the chapter, show up, over 50 people there a half an hour before we was even supposed to begin. By the time we began, 200 people there. By the time we started marching, over 400 people there. And we marched, chanting, screaming, shouting, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. We want justice, we want it now. From Union Square, across the Manhattan Bridge. And when we get over the Manhattan Bridge, there's over 800 of us. And stethoscopes and lab coats and scrubs are just there being supportive with kids. And as we get there and we all take a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, all you hear from people is saying, oh my God, this is a long time. This is a long time. And then you hear me say, it's only been 2 minutes. And then we keep going. 3 minutes, 4 minutes. And then you hear the nerve of somebody in a red hat, MAGA hat, saying, make America great again. You hear them saying, get out of this country, go somewhere else. We don't care about you. 6 minutes, 7 minutes, and nobody reacts. Because what we're doing is more important than to ruin it by one person trying to cause trouble. And we sit there with no interference from police to come get this man and leave him away from us. And the nurses do what we do, which is remain cool, calm, and collective. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. We knelt on that concrete. And it was insane to think that somebody stayed on somebody's neck for that long. And we marched all the way down to the Barclays Center and stood under a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King that said, the time to demand justice is always now. And it was beautiful. We had older Black women there that lived through the civil rights movement that talked about what we was doing. And then we said it cannot end here. So the next week, we did it all over again. Hundreds of people. And it was amazing. And just when we thought we can stop and start focusing on strategic planning, the video of Elijah McClain comes. 23-year-old boy grabbed up by police. And now we're starting to tell people even louder, police brutality is a healthcare crisis. We're dying, even in these times amongst COVID, we're worried about this. It's running through the Black communities. What can we do as nurse leaders? What can we do as nurses? How do we address this? And the answer is continue doing what we've been doing. Strategically meeting, strategically planning, bringing our communities together, reimagining healthcare, restructuring healthcare. And so we keep doing it. And we're going to keep on doing it.